A broken saddle brings unexpected love. Rancher meets Apache woman. John had always been a man of routine. His life on the Arizona ranch was full of hard work, long days, and quiet evenings under the wide desert sky. He had grown up learning the ways of ranching from his father, and the lessons had stayed with him. Every morning before the sun rose, he would saddle his horse, check the fences, and make sure the cattle were safe and healthy. Life was predictable, and John liked it that way. It gave him comfort, knowing that each day had its own rhythm. But even in the calm predictability of ranch life, the desert had a way of surprising him, and he was about to discover just how unexpected life could be. That morning the air was cool, and the sky was painted with shades of orange and pink. John felt a sense of peace as he rode out of the barn, his horse trotting steadily beneath him. The desert stretched endlessly in front of him, dotted with scrub bushes, cactus plants, and rugged rocks that had stood for centuries. It was a landscape he knew like the back of his hand. Yet, despite his familiarity with the land, John always rode with a sense of alertness. The desert was beautiful, but it was also unforgiving, and he had learned that a moment of carelessness could have serious consequences. John's goal for the day was simple: to check the northern pastures. Some of the cattle had wandered further than usual, and he wanted to make sure they were safe. He had ridden this trail countless times, but he never grew careless. As he guided his horse along the winding paths between the rocky hills, he noticed the soft rustle of the wind through the desert brush. Birds called to one another in the distance, and the occasional lizard darted across the sand. The familiar sights and sounds gave him a quiet comfort, a reminder of why he loved this life so much. But the day held a surprise that John could not have anticipated. As he crossed a particularly rocky slope, his horse stumbled on a loose stone. John's grip tightened on the reins, and he leaned forward instinctively. The horse regained its balance, but John noticed something alarming. The old saddle he had used for years had cracked. A deep split ran along the leather, and it creaked dangerously with every movement. He had known the saddle was old, but he had hoped it would last a little longer. Now he was miles from home, with no immediate way to repair it. John pulled his horse to a stop and examined the damage. The saddle was not just cracked, it was close to breaking completely. He could feel the strain as he shifted his weight, and he knew that if he continued to ride, both he and his horse could be in danger. He dismounted carefully, patting his horse's neck to calm it. "Looks like we'll be stuck here for a while," he muttered, frustration and worry mixing in his voice.
The desert that had seemed so peaceful moments ago now felt vast and isolating.
Sitting on a flat rock, John looked out over the rolling hills and dry riverbeds. The wind blew softly, carrying the faint scent of sage and desert flowers. He tried to think of his options. He could try to walk back to the ranch, but the nearest fence line was miles away, and the sun was already high in the sky. It would be a long and exhausting journey, especially with the saddle broken and the ground uneven. He considered staying put and waiting for someone to pass by, hoping that another rancher might be on the trail. But the desert was quiet, and there was no one in sight. The solitude was peaceful, yet it carried a weight that made him uneasy. As he sat there, John reflected on the life he had built. Ranching was demanding work, but it gave him independence and a sense of purpose. He had always been comfortable with being alone. The open sky and quiet landscape had been his companions for years, yet in that moment, the isolation felt different. Being stuck in the desert with no one around made him realize just how much he relied on the small connections in life, even if he had never noticed them before. It was a humbling experience, a reminder that even the strongest and most self-reliant people could face moments of vulnerability. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher, beating down on the rocky terrain. John adjusted the saddle several times, trying to make it safe enough to ride, but each attempt proved unsuccessful. He sighed, realizing that there was no easy solution. The day stretched ahead, full of uncertainty. The thought of spending hours in the hot sun, with a cracked saddle under him, was exhausting. He needed help, but in this vast landscape, help seemed like a distant hope. Then, as he scanned the horizon, a faint sound caught his attention. The soft clip-clop of hooves echoed in the distance. John squinted, trying to see through the heat waves rising from the desert sand. At first, he thought he might be imagining it, but the sound grew louder, steady, and rhythmic. Someone was coming. Relief mixed with curiosity as he realized he might not be alone after all. He watched as a figure appeared in the distance, riding gracefully across the desert floor. It was a young woman, her horse moving with confidence and ease. She seemed to belong to the land, moving as if she had grown up with the hills and the sun. Her presence was unexpected, yet there was something comforting about it. John waved, unsure if she could see him from so far away. As she approached, he noticed her careful handling of the reins and the calm way she guided her horse. She had a quiet strength, a sense of purpose in her movements. John felt a mix of admiration and curiosity. Who was she and why was she here? The desert was vast, and encounters like this were rare. When she drew near, John could see her clearly. She was an Apache woman, her dark hair tied back neatly, her eyes observing him with a mixture of caution and kindness. She slowed her horse as she reached him, nodding in greeting. John dismounted, offering a smile, though he felt a bit embarrassed by his predicament. "Saddle broke," he admitted simply. "Couldn't get it to hold." She studied the saddle carefully, then looked at John. "I can help," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, and reassuring. There was no hesitation in her tone, only a quiet confidence. Together, they worked on the saddle. She examined the leather, pulling out straps and tools from a small pack she carried. Her hands moved skillfully, weaving the leather and reinforcing the cracked areas. John watched, impressed by her knowledge and talent. It was clear she had grown up around horses, understanding their needs and the challenges of the land. As she worked, they exchanged small talk. John learned her name was Ayanana and that she knew the desert as well as he knew his ranch. She spoke of the hills, the waterholes, and the hidden trails that only someone raised here would know. John listened, fascinated. Even in his years of experience, the land still had secrets, and she seemed to hold them all. By the time the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the saddle was repaired enough for John to ride safely. He felt a mix of gratitude and relief. He offered thanks, but words seemed insufficient for the help she had given him. Ayana smiled, brushing dust from her hands. "The desert looks after those who respect it," she said simply. Her words carried a wisdom that resonated with him. In that moment, John realized that this chance encounter was more than just luck. It was a reminder of the kindness that could exist in unexpected places. As they prepared to part ways, John felt a pang of curiosity and hope. The desert, which had seemed vast and lonely that morning, now felt full of possibility. He watched Ayana ride off, her figure blending with the colors of the sunset. There was a sense of connection, fleeting yet meaningful, that lingered in his mind. He mounted his horse, feeling the saddle hold firmly this time. With careful steps, he guided his horse back along the trail, thinking of the day's unexpected turn. What had started as a frustrating accident had turned into an encounter that left a lasting impression. John rode back with a sense of reflection. The desert was unpredictable, but it was also full of surprises that could change life in ways one never expected. He thought of Ayana, her skill, her kindness, and the quiet strength she carried. Though he had been alone most of his life, he realized that connections could appear in the most unlikely moments. A broken saddle had led to a meeting that would remain with him long after the desert faded behind him. It was the beginning of a story he had never imagined, one that would teach him about trust, friendship, and perhaps even love. By the time he reached the edge of the ranch, the sky had turned deep shades of purple and orange. The day had been long, tiring, and full of lessons. John felt a renewed sense of appreciation for the land, for the unexpected moments, and for the people who could appear just when they were needed most. The broken saddle, once a source of frustration, had become a symbol of new beginnings, a reminder that sometimes the universe had its own plans, and they often arrived when least expected. After that first encounter, John could not shake the memory of the Apache woman who had appeared when he needed help most. Her name, Ayana, echoed softly in his mind, like a gentle whisper carried on the desert wind. He had spent the night thinking about how calmly she had handled the broken saddle, the careful way she treated her horse, and the quiet strength in her eyes. He realized he had never met anyone quite like her. There was something about her that felt familiar, as if the desert itself had sent her to him. It was a strange feeling for a man who had spent most of his life alone, yet he could not deny the warmth it brought. The next morning, John rode out early, determined to continue his work on the ranch. Yet despite the tasks awaiting him, his thoughts drifted constantly to Ayanna. He wondered where she came from, what her life was like, and if he would ever see her again. The desert was vast, but their meeting had felt fated, like two paths crossing at exactly the right time. John knew that it was unlikely he would stumble across her again, but he could not help the small hope growing in his chest. As he rode toward the northern pastures, he noticed that the desert seemed different this morning. The light played on the rocks in new ways, and the wind carried a freshness he had not noticed before. It was almost as if the land itself had shifted slightly after yesterday's encounter. He guided his horse slowly, keeping an eye out for anything unusual. Hours passed, and just when he had begun to think that Ayanna was a fleeting memory, he saw her in the distance. She was on her horse, moving effortlessly across the open land, just as she had the day before. John's heart lifted. He waved, and she turned, recognizing him immediately. Ayanna's expression softened into a smile, and John felt a warmth spread through him. This time, there was no need for explanations or caution. Her presence felt like a bridge across two worlds. His life of work and responsibility, and her life connected deeply to the land and its rhythms. As she rode closer, John dismounted, and they greeted each other with simple words, though the comfort between them was undeniable. "I thought I might find you out here again," John said, a small smile playing on his lips. Ayanna laughed softly, a sound that seemed to harmonize with the whispering wind through the desert brush. "The desert is my home," she replied. "I know its trails and paths, and I often come this way. I did not expect to find you here again, though." John shrugged, feeling slightly embarrassed, but Ayanna waved it off with a gentle gesture. "It seems the desert brings people together in its own way," she said. Her words carried wisdom, and John felt a quiet admiration for her insight. Together they began to ride across the desert side by side. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the natural sounds of hoofbeats, wind, and distant bird calls. There was no rush, no urgency, only the rhythm of the horses and the connection forming between the two riders. John felt a sense of peace he had not experienced in years. The ranching life was demanding, filled with responsibility and solitude, but here, with Ayanna, he discovered that he could share his world without losing himself. As they traveled, John began to learn more about Ayanna. She spoke of the hills, the hidden waterholes, and the secret trails known only to her people. She explained how her family had lived on this land for generations, learning to understand its moods, its dangers, and its quiet beauty. Her stories painted a vivid picture of a life deeply connected to nature, one that respected the land and all living creatures. John listened intently, fascinated by the knowledge she carried. Even though he had worked the desert for decades, her perspective revealed parts of it he had never noticed. In return, John shared his own knowledge of ranching. He spoke of the cattle, the fences, and the work required to maintain a ranch. He showed Ayanna how he checked for signs of illness among the cattle, how he guided them safely across difficult terrain, and how he tracked their movements to ensure they did not stray too far. Ayanna listened with curiosity and enthusiasm, asking questions and offering her own insights. She had grown up in the desert, but the structured work of ranching was new to her, and she approached it with interest and respect. As the hours passed, the two became more comfortable with one another. They laughed over small mistakes. John's horse occasionally wandered off course, or Ayanna would point out a more efficient way to navigate the terrain. The shared work created a bond, built on cooperation, trust, and mutual admiration. John felt an unexpected joy in having someone beside him, someone who understood the land and respected it as deeply as he did. Ayanna, too, seemed to enjoy the company. Her initial caution faded as she realized that John was sincere, hard-working, and kind-hearted. They paused at a small, hidden stream in the desert to rest their horses and refill water supplies. The stream was cool and clear, a rare treasure in the arid landscape. Ayana knelt beside it, cupping water in her hands and drinking slowly. John watched, noticing the ease with which she moved and the grace in her every action. He realized that there was more to this woman than he had first understood. She carried a quiet confidence, a sense of independence, and a gentle kindness that seemed to radiate naturally. "I come here often," Ayana said, glancing at him with a small smile. "It is one of the few places where the desert feels soft, almost like it is welcoming us." John nodded, understanding what she meant. The desert could be harsh, unforgiving, and lonely, but it also had moments of unexpected beauty and comfort. He felt a sense of gratitude for this day, for the chance to meet someone who could see the desert in the same way he did. After resting, they continued their journey. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the desert floor, John noticed how natural it felt to have Ayana beside him. They spoke little, letting the silence carry them forward, yet every glance, every shared smile seemed to communicate more than words ever could. There was an unspoken understanding, a quiet connection that grew stronger with each passing hour. When they reached a particularly steep hill, John struggled to guide his horse along the rocky path. Ayana noticed immediately and dismounted, moving to his side. "Here, let me help," she said, her hand steady as she adjusted the reins and offered guidance. John felt a surge of gratitude and something deeper he could not yet name. The desert had brought them together, and in her presence he discovered that trust and care could blossom even in the most unexpected moments. By late afternoon, they had reached a flat plateau overlooking the northern pastures. The view stretched endlessly, with rolling hills, scattered cacti, and the cattle grazing peacefully below. John felt a sense of accomplishment, not just for the work completed, but for the companionship he had found. He looked at Ayana, noticing how the sun highlighted her features, the way her eyes reflected the colors of the desert, and the ease with which she carried herself. "You've made this day much easier," John said quietly, feeling a rare openness in his voice. Ayana smiled, a hint of warmth in her expression. "And you've made it interesting," she replied lightly, though there was sincerity in her tone. The subtle humor in her words brought a laugh from John, and for the first time in a long while, he felt completely at ease. As they began the journey back toward the ranch, John realized that this day had changed something within him. The desert, which had once felt isolating and solitary, now seemed full of possibility. The encounter with Ayana had opened a new chapter, one where connection, trust, and understanding could exist even in the vast and untamed wilderness. He felt a quiet excitement for the days to come, knowing that their paths might cross again. Riding side by side, John and Ayana moved slowly down the trails, letting the rhythm of their horses guide them. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light across the land, and the shadows grew long. They spoke less now, content in the companionship of each other's presence. There was no need for words. The shared experience of the day, the laughter, the small lessons, and the trust built along the way spoke volumes. By the time they reached the edge of the ranch, the evening air was cool, carrying the scent of sagebrush and the promise of nightfall. John looked at Ayana, feeling a gratitude he could not fully express. She had turned an ordinary day into something extraordinary. Her kindness, skill, and presence had transformed a simple ride across the desert into an unforgettable experience. Before parting, Ayana offered a small nod and a smile. "I will see you again," she said simply. Her words were confident yet gentle, and John felt a surge of hope and anticipation. "I hope so," he replied, meaning every word. As Ayana rode off into the fading light, John watched her figure disappear against the colors of the desert sky. He mounted his horse, feeling a sense of fulfillment and curiosity. The day had begun with routine work, a broken saddle and uncertainty, but it had ended with new knowledge, laughter, and a growing connection that neither of them had expected. For John, the desert was no longer just a place of solitude and work. It had become a place of possibility, where paths could cross, friendships could form, and perhaps in time, love could blossom. He guided his horse back to the ranch, the memory of Ayana's presence lingering in his mind like a gentle promise of the unexpected joys that life could bring. Over the next few days, John and Ayana continued to meet in the desert. Each encounter became an opportunity to learn from one another, to share stories, and to experience life in ways neither of them had anticipated. What had begun as a chance meeting over a broken saddle was slowly turning into a bond neither of them fully understood yet, but both felt growing in their hearts. John had always been comfortable with solitude, but spending time with Ayana opened a new perspective. He noticed the world through her eyes, and it was both familiar and entirely new at the same time. She moved through the desert with an ease that spoke of generations of knowledge, understanding the land in ways that went beyond maps or fences. She could sense where water was hidden beneath rocks, which plants could be used for healing, and which paths would keep them safe from the unpredictable desert animals. Every small detail she shared fascinated John. He had grown up on this land, yet she revealed parts of it he had never noticed. In return, John shared the details of ranch life with her. He showed her how to tend to the cattle, how to check the fences for weak spots, and how to guide the herd safely through tricky terrain. He explained the work involved in maintaining the ranch, the long hours, the planning, and the responsibility that came with it. Ayana listened carefully, asking questions and offering suggestions based on her knowledge of the land. She had a natural curiosity, and John admired the way she thought through problems with calm intelligence. One afternoon, they rode to a small canyon that John used as a shortcut to the northern fields. The canyon was narrow, with jagged rocks lining its sides, and only those who knew the desert well could navigate it safely. Ayana led the way, guiding her horse confidently through the tight spaces. John followed, grateful for her expertise. "I would have never found this path myself," he admitted, smiling. Ayana glanced back at him, her eyes bright. "The land has its secrets," she said softly. "You just have to know where to look." Her voice carried the calm certainty of someone who had spent her life listening to the desert, learning from it rather than trying to conquer it. John felt a quiet admiration for her wisdom. He realized that while he had lived a life of work and responsibility, she had lived a life of deep understanding and connection, one that he had never experienced. As they rode together, they shared more personal stories. John spoke of his childhood, of long days working alongside his father, and of the lessons he had learned about patience, hard work, and respect for the land. Ayana shared tales of her own upbringing, of learning from her family about the ways of the desert, of understanding the balance between people, animals, and nature. They discovered similarities despite their different lives. Both valued family, both respected the land, and both understood the importance of care and attention in everything they did. By the end of the day, they paused at a quiet ridge overlooking the valley below. The setting sun painted the landscape in warm hues of orange and gold. The cattle grazed calmly, and the desert stretched endlessly in every direction. They sat quietly, each lost in thought, yet aware of the other's presence beside them. There was no need for words. The silence was comfortable, filled with understanding and respect. Over the following days, their bond deepened further. John found himself looking forward to their meetings, eager to learn from Ayana and to share his own knowledge. He admired her strength and independence, her connection to the land, and her gentle wisdom. Ayana, in turn, appreciated John's dedication, his work ethic, and his willingness to listen and learn. She found comfort in his steady presence and enjoyed the small moments of humor and shared discovery. One morning, they came across a group of cattle that had wandered too close to a steep drop. John moved quickly to guide them back, but he realized that the ground was unstable, and one misstep could lead to disaster. Ayana stepped in, using her knowledge of the land to find a safe path for the animals. Together, they worked in harmony, guiding the cattle back to safer ground. In that moment, John realized how much he trusted her, not just for her knowledge, but for her judgment, her calmness, and her ability to remain composed under pressure. As the days turned into weeks, their interactions became more natural and effortless. They began to anticipate each other's needs, finishing each other's sentences and understanding unspoken cues. Their laughter became a regular part of the desert, a sound that seemed to mingle with the wind and the rustle of leaves. Each day brought new discoveries about the land, about their work, and about each other. They shared stories of dreams, fears, and hopes for the future. slowly revealing parts of themselves that they had kept hidden from the world. One evening, as the sky turned shades of pink and purple, they rested near a small pond hidden among the rocks. The water reflected the colors of the sky, creating a mirror image of the desert's beauty. John watched Ayana as she knelt by the water, her reflection clear in the still surface. There was a quiet grace in the way she moved, a calm strength that made him feel both admiration and something deeper, though he did not yet fully understand it. "I've never seen the desert like this," John said softly, breaking the silence. "It's beautiful, and yet it feels different when you're here." Ayana looked up at him, her eyes meeting his. "The desert shows itself in many ways," she said. "Some people see only its harshness. Others, like you, see the work it requires. But those who listen carefully can feel its heart. You are beginning to see it too." John nodded, feeling a connection not just to the land, but to her words and the wisdom behind them. It was as if she was opening a new world to him, one where understanding, respect, and harmony mattered more than control or mastery. He realized that this was a rare gift, and he felt grateful for it. As the evening grew cooler, they prepared to head back. The desert was alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, and the stars began to appear one by one, shining brightly in the clear sky. John and Ayana rode side by side, their horses moving steadily through the soft sand. There was a sense of peace in their journey, a quiet joy that came from shared experience and growing trust. Along the way, they encountered a small herd of wild deer. Ayana paused, motioning for John to be quiet. Together they watched the animals from a distance, marveling at their grace and agility. John felt a sense of wonder he had not felt in years. The desert was full of surprises, and with Ayana beside him, even familiar landscapes took on new meaning. By the time they returned to the ranch, the sky was deep with stars. John felt a sense of fulfillment, not just from the day's work, but from the companionship he had found. The bond between him and Ayana was growing, built on shared experience, mutual respect, and a quiet admiration that neither could deny. They had begun to learn each other's worlds, discovering common ground and appreciating their differences. Before parting, Ayana smiled at John. "Tomorrow, I will show you another path," she said, "one that few people know. You might see the desert in a way you never have before." John felt a thrill of anticipation. He realized that these encounters were changing him, opening his heart to experiences he had long thought impossible. The desert, once a place of work and solitude, had become a space of learning, connection, and discovery. With Ayana by his side, every ride felt like an adventure, every lesson a gift, and every shared moment a step closer to something neither of them could yet name. As they went their separate ways for the night, John looked back toward the fading silhouette of Ayana's horse. He felt a sense of hope and curiosity, eager to see what the next day would bring. The desert had a way of testing people, but it also had a way of rewarding those who respected it, who listened, and who approached it with an open heart. John knew that he had found something rare in Ayana, a teacher, a companion, and perhaps in time something even deeper. That night as he sat by the ranch fire, John thought about the day, about the lessons learned, and about the quiet bond forming between him and Ayana. The stars shone brightly above, casting a soft light over the desert, and John felt a sense of connection to both the land and the woman who had become a part of his world. He realized that life had a way of surprising those who were willing to pay attention, and that sometimes the most meaningful experiences came from the simplest of moments, a shared trail, a hidden path, and the quiet presence of someone who understood you in ways no one else could. For John, the desert was no longer just a place to work and survive. It had become a place of learning, of laughter, and of quiet companionship. With Ayana by his side, every day held new possibilities. He looked forward to the mornings, to the rides, to the stories they would share, and to the slow, gentle unfolding of a connection that neither had expected, but both had begun to cherish. The days that followed continued to strengthen the bond between John and Ayana, but with every passing moment, both of them began to realize that the connection they shared was more complicated than they had anticipated. Their companionship was no longer just about work, learning, or exploration. It had begun to touch something deeper in their hearts. Yet, with the growing closeness came questions, doubts, and the subtle weight of challenges neither had faced before. John had always been a man of routine, and the demands of the ranch were constant. The cattle needed care, fences needed repair, and the responsibilities of running the land left him little time for anything else. Yet he found himself thinking of Ayana during every spare moment, wondering what she might be doing, hoping that they would cross paths again. There was a joy in seeing her, a lightness that came to his days when she was near, but he also felt uncertainty. How could he balance the life he had built with the feelings that were slowly growing in his heart? Ayana too felt a stirring of emotion she had not expected. She had spent her life connected to the desert, her family, and her community. The traditions she had grown up with were deeply important to her, and the thought of opening her heart to someone from outside her world brought both excitement and fear. She admired John, his dedication, his honesty, and his gentle nature. But she also worried, how would her people see this connection? Could she maintain her identity and her independence while allowing herself to care for someone else? These questions weighed heavily on her as she rode through the desert, considering the possibilities and the risks. One afternoon, a storm began to gather in the distance. Dark clouds rolled over the hills, and the wind picked up, carrying dust and the sharp scent of rain. John was out near the northern pastures inspecting a fence line when he noticed the storm approaching. The sky darkened quickly, and the first drops of rain began to fall. He knew the cattle would be anxious, and the uneven terrain could be dangerous. He needed help, and he hoped that Ayana might be nearby. As if sensing his thoughts, Ayana appeared over a small rise, her horse moving steadily through the wind. John waved, relieved to see her. She had noticed the storm as well and had come to assist. Together they worked quickly, guiding the cattle away from the unstable hills and toward safer ground. The wind whipped around them, and rain began to fall harder, but neither hesitated. Their horses moved with careful precision, their movements in harmony as they communicated without words. At one point, a loose rock slid down the hill, narrowly missing a calf. Ayana reacted instantly, positioning herself between the animal and danger while signaling to John. They worked together seamlessly, anticipating each other's actions, their trust in one another becoming evident. John realized that he relied on her not just for her knowledge of the land, but for her judgment, her calmness, and her courage. In the middle of the storm, he felt a deep admiration for her, and something more, something tender that he could no longer ignore, began to take root. After what felt like hours, the storm passed, leaving the desert washed in the soft, fresh scent of rain. The sky cleared enough for the sun to peek through the clouds, casting golden light across the land. The cattle were safe, and the immediate danger had passed. John and Ayana guided their horses to a nearby canyon for shelter. Exhausted but grateful, they tied the animals to sturdy trees and sat together on a flat rock, letting the calm after the storm settle around them. The silence was comforting but also gave room for reflection. John looked at Ayana, noticing how the rain had left her hair damp, how the light glinted in her eyes, and how her presence seemed to fill the space around him. He wanted to speak, to share the feelings he was struggling to name, but he was unsure of the right words. Ayana seemed to sense his thoughts, as she often did, and she smiled gently. "Storms come and go," she said softly. "The desert teaches patience. It teaches us to trust what we cannot control." John nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind her words. Life, much like the desert, could be unpredictable, and love, even budding love, required patience, courage, and trust. He realized that his growing feelings for Ayana were no longer something he could ignore. There was a warmth in his chest, a hope that perhaps she felt the same way, though fear held him back from asking directly. Ayana, meanwhile, felt the stirrings of a similar realization. She had admired John's character from the start, but now she recognized that her feelings were more than admiration. They were a gentle affection, a budding love that both excited and frightened her. She worried about the opinions of her family and community, but she also knew that life was too short to deny what her heart had found. She studied John quietly, aware of the unspoken bond growing between them, and wondered if he too understood the depth of their connection. As the sun set, painting the canyon in hues of orange, pink, and purple, they shared stories of their pasts, their hopes, and their fears. John spoke of his years on the ranch, the challenges he had faced, and the dreams he held for the future. Ayanna shared stories of her family, her community, and the lessons she had learned from the land. Their words flowed easily, and in the quiet moments between they felt the growing closeness of their hearts. Night fell, and the temperature dropped. They built a small fire using dry wood and stones, the flames casting flickering light on their faces. The warmth of the fire mirrored the warmth in their hearts, and for a time words were unnecessary. They sat together, feeling a connection that was more than friendship, more than admiration. It was a gentle, growing love that neither could fully name yet, but both recognized. Yet even in this moment of closeness, doubts lingered. John wondered how this connection would fit into the life he had built, and whether it was fair to Ayanna to bring complications into her world. Ayanna questioned whether she could maintain her independence and identity while opening her heart. Both understood that the path ahead would require choices, courage, and compromise. Before parting that night, they made a silent agreement. Their feelings would be acknowledged, but they would proceed with caution, respecting the lives they had built and the traditions they held dear. They knew that the desert had brought them together, but it would take time, understanding, and trust to navigate the path forward. As they rode back the next morning, the desert seemed different, alive with possibility. The experiences of the storm, the shared work, and the quiet conversations had strengthened their bond, preparing them for the challenges that lay ahead. They were no longer simply two people who met by chance. They were companions who had begun to rely on each other, whose hearts had started to recognize a deeper connection. Over the following days, their routine included long rides together, guiding cattle, checking fences, and exploring the hidden corners of the desert. Each shared experience brought new understanding, laughter, and moments of quiet intimacy. John learned to appreciate Ayanna's patience and wisdom, while Ayanna grew to admire John's steadfastness and integrity. They began to see not just the land and the work, but the subtle ways in which their partnership could grow into something enduring. At night, when they parted and returned to their separate lives, both carried the memory of the day with them. John thought of Ayanna's smile, the sound of her laughter, and the gentle way she had guided him through the storm. Ayanna recalled John's steady presence, his kind words, and the way he trusted her with the land and with his heart. Though the challenges remained, opinions, responsibilities, and the uncertainty of the future, they both understood that the connection they shared was rare and worth nurturing. One evening, as the stars began to appear in the clear desert sky, John paused on a hill overlooking the ranch. He thought of Ayanna, her strength, her wisdom, and the quiet affection that had begun to grow between them. He realized that love, much like the desert, was unpredictable and sometimes difficult to navigate, but it was also full of beauty, discovery, and possibility. For the first time in his life, he felt certain that some connections were meant to be explored, even if the path was uncertain. Ayanna, riding along a nearby trail, thought the same. She felt a warmth in her heart that had grown steadily over their time together. She knew that challenges lay ahead, but she also understood that the bond she shared with John was real and meaningful. The desert had tested them, shown them both danger and beauty, and now it had given them the opportunity to choose what mattered most. That night, as the desert grew quiet under a blanket of stars, both John and Ayanna lay awake, thinking of the other, feeling the gentle tug of affection and admiration that neither could deny. The bond they shared had been tested by circumstance and nature, but it had survived and even grown stronger. They knew that the next steps would require courage, honesty, and trust, but for the first time, the possibility of love felt real, tangible, and within reach. The desert had brought them together through a broken saddle, a chance encounter, and shared experiences, but it was their choices, their understanding, and their growing hearts that would determine the path forward. Challenges awaited, but so did hope, and both John and Ayanna knew that facing the future together, carefully and with respect, could lead to a connection that neither had imagined but both now treasured deeply. The days that followed the storm were filled with a quiet sense of understanding and anticipation between John and Ayanna. Their bond had grown stronger, built on trust, shared experiences, and a mutual respect that neither could ignore. Yet both of them knew that feelings alone were not enough. Life, as they had learned, was full of responsibilities, traditions, and expectations. If their connection was to become something lasting, they would need courage, honesty, and the willingness to face the unknown together. John spent his mornings tending to the ranch as usual. He repaired fences, checked on the cattle, and maintained the land he had cared for all his life. But now, every task seemed brighter, every morning warmer, because he carried Ayanna's presence in his heart. He thought of her often, the way she had guided him through the storm, her quiet wisdom, her laughter that seemed to mingle with the wind, and the ease with which she moved through the desert. It was as though the land itself had conspired to bring them together, and John felt a mixture of gratitude, hope, and something deeper that he could no longer ignore. Ayanna, too, carried thoughts of John with her during her days. She worked among the hills, the trails, and the small streams of her community, yet her mind often wandered to the rancher who had shown her kindness, patience, and understanding. She admired his dedication, his quiet strength, and the way he treated both the land and the animals with care. But beyond admiration, she felt a warmth in her heart that she had not expected, a gentle, growing affection that made her day brighter and her nights filled with reflection. One afternoon, John rode out to check the northern pastures once more. The sun was high, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain, and the air was dry but carried the faint scent of desert blooms. He guided his horse carefully, thinking about the moments he had shared with Ayanna, and hoping that she might be nearby. As if the desert itself had heard his thoughts, he saw her approaching along a hidden trail, her horse moving with the confidence and grace he had come to admire.
"Ayanna," he called softly, a smile spreading across his face.
She returned the smile, her eyes lighting up as she recognized him. "John," she said warmly. "I was hoping to find you here." They rode together side by side, letting the horses guide them across the desert. There was a sense of familiarity and comfort in their presence, a natural rhythm that had developed over weeks of shared experience. They laughed at small mishaps, exchanged stories, and admired the landscape that stretched endlessly before them. But there was also a quiet tension, a sense that both were aware of the deeper emotions beginning to stir between them. As the afternoon wore on, they came upon a secluded canyon, hidden from the main trails. The walls of the canyon rose high, and the sunlight created patterns of gold and shadow across the rocks. It was a place of peace and solitude, away from the demands of work, the expectations of others, and the distractions of daily life. John dismounted first, patting his horse gently, and turned to Ayanna with a seriousness she had not seen before. "I want to speak honestly," he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "These past weeks being with you has changed something in me. I feel a connection I have never felt before. I admire you, respect you, and I think I've begun to care for you deeply." Ayanna listened quietly, her heart beating faster. She had felt the same way but had not known if he shared her feelings. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the honesty in his voice, and the warmth of his presence. Slowly she dismounted as well, standing beside him, her hand brushing against the reins of her horse. "I feel the same, John," she admitted softly. "I have grown to care for you as well. At first I admired your dedication and your heart, but now I think my feelings have grown into something deeper. I was afraid, though, afraid of what this might mean, afraid of the challenges we would face." John took a deep breath, feeling a sense of relief and joy. "I was afraid too," he admitted.
But I cannot ignore what we share. The desert brought us together, and I believe it has something important to teach us, not just about the land, but about each other.
They stood together in the quiet canyon, the sound of a distant stream trickling through the rocks, and the gentle breeze carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers. The desert seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging the significance of this moment. Slowly they reached out and held each other's hands, a simple gesture that carried more meaning than words could express. There was trust, admiration, and a newfound love woven into that touch, a promise of something enduring. In the days that followed, John and Ayana began to navigate their lives with a shared understanding. They continued their work on the ranch and in the desert, guiding cattle, repairing fences, and exploring hidden trails together. But now every task, every ride, and every moment carried an added layer of joy and connection. They laughed more freely, shared stories more openly, and supported each other with a depth of understanding that only comes from true companionship. Word of their bond eventually reached the nearby communities, but instead of judgment or disapproval, there was curiosity and admiration. People noticed the care, respect, and harmony between John and Ayana, and many recognized that their connection was built on more than just affection. It was built on trust, shared experience, and a deep understanding of one another's values. John's neighbors admired the way he treated Ayana with respect, and Ayana's family appreciated the genuine care he showed. Slowly, any fears or doubts that had lingered began to fade, replaced by a sense of acceptance and hope. One morning, John and Ayana rode together to a ridge overlooking the ranch. The sun rose behind them, casting long golden rays across the desert. They stopped, letting their horses rest, and took in the view. The cattle grazed peacefully below. The wind whispered through the sagebrush, and the land stretched endlessly before them. In that moment, they felt a profound sense of connection, not just to each other, but to the world around them. "We've come a long way," John said quietly, his hand brushing against hers. "Yes," Ayana agreed, smiling. "And I feel like this is just the beginning." They shared a quiet laugh, feeling the warmth of the morning sun and the comfort of each other's presence. There was no rush, no pressure, only the knowledge that they had found something rare and meaningful in each other. Over time, they would face challenges, make decisions, and navigate the complexities of life. But for now, they simply existed together in the moment, appreciating the beauty of what they had discovered. As weeks turned into months, their love grew steadily. They continued their work, shared responsibilities, and supported one another in every way possible. John taught Ayana the more intricate details of ranching, while Ayana shared her deep knowledge of the desert, its trails, and its hidden treasures. Together, they found balance, combining their strengths and learning from one another. Their connection was no longer a secret or a fleeting moment. It had become a part of their daily lives, a source of strength, joy, and inspiration. Evenings were often spent sitting by a small fire near the ranch, talking about their dreams, sharing stories, and planning for the future. They spoke of the life they wanted to build together, one that respected the land, honored their traditions, and embraced the love they had found. The challenges of the past, the storm, doubts, and fears, had become lessons, guiding them toward a deeper understanding of each other and themselves. One night, under a sky filled with stars, John turned to Ayana and took her hand. "The desert brought us together," he said softly, "and I believe it will continue to guide us. I want to build a life with you, one that honors both of our worlds and everything we care about." Ayana's eyes shone with tears of happiness. "I want that too," she replied. "I trust you, John, and I believe that together we can face anything the future holds." From that moment, their lives became intertwined in ways neither had imagined. They rode together, worked together, and explored the desert side by side. Every day brought new discoveries, laughter, and shared experiences. Their love was not rushed or forced. It grew naturally, nurtured by trust, respect, and the lessons they had learned along the way. The broken saddle, which had once caused frustration and uncertainty, became a symbol of the unexpected paths life could take. It had brought them together, teaching them that sometimes the most meaningful experiences come from moments of challenge and chance. John and Ayana had found something rare in one another, a connection that was built on understanding, shared values, and a gentle, growing love. In time, their relationship became an example for others in the community. People admired the respect, trust, and harmony between them, recognizing that true love often grows quietly, through patience, shared experience, and a willingness to face challenges together. John and Ayana had discovered that love could be found in the most unexpected places, and that the bonds formed through kindness, understanding, and shared adventure were the strongest of all. As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange, pink, and purple, John and Ayana stood side by side, holding hands and looking out over the land they both cherished. The desert had tested them, challenged them, and brought them together in ways they could never have predicted. And now it had given them something far greater than either could have imagined. A love that was patient, enduring, and deeply meaningful. Together they rode back to the ranch, their hearts full of hope and joy. They knew that life would continue to present challenges, but they also knew that whatever came their way, they would face it together. The broken saddle had been the beginning of a journey, but their love, the connection they had nurtured through trust, respect, and shared experience, would carry them forward through every trail, every storm, and every sunrise the desert had yet to offer. And so, John and Ayana embraced the unexpected love the desert had brought them, building a life full of laughter, adventure, understanding, and a quiet, enduring happiness that would last for years to come.